is James here with the Oracle Outlook for the week starting April the 20th, 2020. Thanks so much for tuning in and joining me for this week's video reading. I am so happy to have you here. Well, I'm on a trend here, so I'm continuing to honor the request of viewers, and this particular viewer, Ismail, asked me if I would be willing to work with Kipper for this Oracle Outlook video reading. And so I thought, why not? And the deck that I'm specifically going to be working with is one that's quite popular in this space when I use it. So I'm going to be working with Rupa's Kipper Carton by Rupa Dudley, and I will be leaving information about the deck in the description box below. But now here's the thing about this deck if you've seen me use it in the past. One of the things that I love about Rupa's deck is that she added additional cards to it so you can customize the deck to your liking, right? To your fancy. And in a way, when you do that, it becomes somewhat unique to you, right? Because we're all not going to use the same additional cards, right? So, but because Ismail is learning how to work with Kipper, just starting out on the Kipper journey, which I'm excited about, and is also in the process of creating a personal Kipper deck, I thought I would take out all the additional cards that I have been using in the deck this week and just solely working on the more traditional 36 cards that come in a maybe more traditional Kipper pack to help in that learning process. So this week I'm just going to be distilling the deck down to 36 cards rather than using all the additional extra cards that I have incorporated into the deck. So now that I've set things up, let's get to the table and see what Rupa's Kipper Carton wants to share with us about the week ahead. And here we are with the cards on the table, and I'm going to take a few moments to shuffle the deck. And as I shuffle the cards, I'm focusing on my usual intention for these readings, and that is for the information, for the insight, for any guidance and advice to come through the cards that's going to be most helpful and beneficial as we move through the upcoming week. So I'm feeling one more time will be good. All right. And now I'm going to go ahead and cut the deck. And fan the cards out. And now I'm looking for 5 cards in the fan that are getting my attention because I'm continuing to work with a line of 5. So I have the 5 cards selected, and I'm now going to take the remainder, the cards that I didn't select, and move them to one side. Alright, so I don't have to do my check. I can clearly see that I have 5 cards here, so I'm just going to arrange them in a line in the order that they were selected. Just trying to get them all in view. I think that looks good. Alright, so what I'm going to do is, typically I don't do this with Kipper, but I was feeling led and inspired to try something differently. Normally I read Kipper as a storyline from left to right, but I'm feeling inclined that I want to start with the middle card this week. So it'll be interesting to see what the middle card is, given that I was feeling that kind of intuitive prompt. So taking a look at the card, which would represent the central issue or the focus, here we have house. Boy, you cannot escape this, right? So it seems like we're getting the same message again and again over the last few weeks, and I've been using different systems, which is the most interesting thing. So of course, house represents one's home, one's personal life, one's family, issues surrounding comfort. And so that makes sense, again, with what's going on in the collective. And what I love about these types of systems, and what I'm talking about Lenormand, Gypsy Witch cards, Gypsy cards, and now Kipper, is that they are more grounded than, say, when I'm working with tarot or maybe even my personal oracle deck, right? And so they've been reflecting what's going on in the world around us at this time, what we're all collectively experiencing. So, of course, the house would represent our homes, and so a lot of us are still in the experience of isolating, staying at home, whether it's by choice or it's now by executive order or mandate. We're all in our homes. So again, as the focus card is focusing on your home, what can you be doing around your home? I'm looking at the image, and here we have a front door. So again, just like a few weeks ago when I used the retro gypsy cards and we had the house card, that image had the backyard of the home. Here we have the front of the home. So it could just be a matter of, again, doing things around the house, maybe doing something with the front of the house. We're in the season of spring, so for some of you, this might be about gardening in front of your house. But what can you be doing close to home? Now, as I said the words close to home, it's also making me feel like, metaphorically speaking, we could be experiencing a situation that is close to home, meaning close to us in terms of our personal lives. So one of the things that comes up is another one of the meanings which I mentioned is family. So there may be a family situation that we are needing to put some focus and attention on this week. And so that could be the people that you live with under the same roof, or it could be a family member who is living apart from you and also doing the self-quarantine or the self-isolation thing. It could be maybe just checking in with family members. It could also be that how can you achieve a greater level of comfort with your living situation as it currently is. That was the message that just came in, so I'm just going to say it as I received it, because for me the house can also represent issues around comfort and being comfortable, right? So for some of us who may be experiencing cabin fever, it could be, this card is asking us metaphorically, how can you become more comfortable with the living situation that you are currently in? So that is house. So now let's take a look at the cards that are surrounding house to maybe give us more information about that. So starting with the card on the far left, opening the line up, we have sad news. Okay, so sad news for me can represent receiving news, because the woman on the image on the card has a crumpled piece of paper in her hands that's up to her face, right? So this usually can represent receiving news that's upsetting or disappointing, right? But it doesn't necessarily have to be about receiving news. It could just be about being in a position of being upset or disappointed. And I love the fact that she's looking or facing this way. She's not really looking, but she's facing this way, right? So for me, this carries emphasis on the central issue of focus, right? A lot of us may be experiencing upset and disappointment with the situation that we are currently, having to live with, right? So there's that. Sad news is a cause and effect card in the Kipper system, and so usually a card behind it will tell us what the cause is, but there's not a card here. But it could tell us what the news that's upsetting or disappointing, or the experience of being upset or disappointed, what that would affect, because the character is facing or in the direction of this card, right? So let's take a look at that now. But starting off the line, it could just be about dealing with something that's either upsetting or disappointing, and it may be in part receiving some kind of news that leads to that, right? Oh, and I was about to move on, but one of the things that is catching my eye is that there is an image from a tarot card, and that is the Three of Swords. So the Three of Swords, if I just riff on that for a moment, the Three of Swords can represent a couple of things. Going with the idea that the image conveys upset or disappointment, then this card is also talking about the same thing. This card usually represents being hurt, a sense of woundedness. It could be about heartbreak, and it could also be as a result of, for me, this is one of my personal meanings as a tarot reader for the Three of Swords, is that there may be something having to do with some kind of confusion, some kind of misunderstanding, maybe even a lie, that kind of thing. And that has produced the emotional response of upset and disappointment, right? For me, it can usually represent some sort of communication issue, because the Suit of Swords for me can represent communication. So some sort of communication issue where there's been some sort of confusion or misunderstanding, right? And it also can imply that we want to kind of maybe do something about the situation in terms of resolving it before it gets worse, right? So that is what I would add as an underlying message or meaning based on the Three of Swords appearing in the image, right? So now let's take a look at the card between House and Sad News. And here we have, okay, so here we have the Mentor card. And Mentor in traditional Kipper cartomancy is known as good lord or good gentleman, right? So this card usually talks about an older man, right? And so it would be an older man than all of us who are collectively experiencing this video at the same time, right? So this can represent a father or a father figure, somebody who carries that sense of being, right? So it may not be dad, but somebody who's like dad. But it can also represent any older man. It could also represent a man who's in a position of authority, because I tend to look at the Mentor card as somebody who has a sense of experience or wisdom or maturity, right? So there's that. Now going with the word mentor, this could be, a guide, a teacher, some kind of leader, somebody who is showing us the way based on his experience. But mentor in and of itself usually can represent an older man. So there may be, if I read the storyline, the way it's being presented, if I go with the first card, House and Mentor could represent an older family member, an older male family member, right? So there's that. But it could also be that the upset and disappointment is either going to be affecting this relationship, right? Because it would be, this is the person that is being affected by that, right? So there may be some sort of upset, disappointment with an older man, or that's going to affect an older man, right? So we may hear of some message, right? And as I'm saying message, I'm seeing in my mind the fin de siècle Kipper card of this, which is message of concern, right? So it may be that we get news or message concerning an older man, or that we're going to be concerned based on news or message about an older man, right? So that's what I'm seeing with this. But again, mentor would represent an older man. So it would be somebody older than you. So you have to stop and think. It could be, again, like I said, father figure, could be an older sibling, could be a cousin, an uncle, even a grandfather. If it's a family member or somebody who's close to home, then that would be maybe a family friend, something of that nature. But it could also be, again, somebody who is in a position of authority, right? So that's what I'm seeing with the first three cards. So now let's turn our attention to the cards on the other side of the line. So the card closest to House on the other side is, and here we have Thief. Okay, so Thief is for me a card that can represent loss, right? And so it is a directional cue, and just like Sad News, it's a cause and effect card. So usually what happens is when this card appears, the card that's behind it is what's being taken, and whatever's being taken on this side is usually being presented over here on this side. So it's taking something from family. So for me, I would say that there may be something in which it feels like, or the experience is like, and I'm saying feels like because of the Sad News card, it feels like something's being taken from our home. And I'm saying home, I'm thinking home life, like our personal life. Our family's being robbed to some degree, or, there's something that's being removed, right? Now, thief for me can also, beyond that, represent some kind of intrusion, right? So there may be something that's intruding on our home lives, our personal lives, right? Going with the idea that the thief is actually an intruder, right? So there may be some sort of intrusion on our personal lives. And it could also be as a result of this. Now, what I do is I mirror the card. So here we have mentor mirroring thief. So there may be something about an older man who's intruding on our personal lives, our home lives, our family lives, that kind of thing, right? And as a result of that, there may be the experience of being robbed or cheated, something of that nature. Now, if we go maybe with the more collective experience, then this card, metaphorically speaking, is asking us, what's the takeaway, right? We may be looking at it from what we are losing, but is there another way of looking at that? And again, I'm being very metaphorical and metaphysical in my approach to that. What's the takeaway? And the takeaway would be like, what's the lesson in the experience, right? So there's another way of looking at that, because I tend to look at the thief as a takeaway card, because the thief removes something, right? It takes something away. So what's the takeaway? We may be looking at something based on what we think we're losing, what's being taken from us, what's being stolen, quote unquote, from us. But the mentor card, now remember, the mentor is somebody who has knowledge, experience, a sense of maturity. So maybe if we go with maybe a more mentor-like viewpoint or approach to the situation, what's the takeaway, right? So that is thief. Again, thief in its core meaning, in the traditional sense, represents, something being taken away, right? So it could be a matter of reduction, right? Because I'm seeing in my head mice from Lenormand. And Lenormand, mice in that system, I should say, is all about something being taken away, something being gradually removed, gradually declining, gradual decay, those kinds of things, right? And as I'm looking at the image here, the thief is holding a picture, right? So it's making me feel like the expression like, picture this, or, is there a way that we're framing a particular experience? And that would say, will we be willing to reframe it differently, right? What I love about Rupa's deck is that I give myself permission to read into the imagery, right? So that's what I'm seeing in the imagery, right? So there may be, with this being a chess piece, so there may be a piece that we're feeling, an important piece that we're feeling is missing or it's being taken away, those kinds of things. Like, what's the missing piece is making me feel like that's the question, right? All right, so now the thief is facing the last card in the line. So let's see where this is going. And here we have setbacks, but this card is, in traditional Kipper cartomancy, is known as short illness, right? So for me, the first thing that I'm getting with the two cards here is that there may be a sense of loss, but this card for me represents recovery, and I'm playing on the image that here we have a person who's seeing a therapist or is in bed and receiving a treatment, right? So this person's in the process of recovery. Now, interestingly enough, again, you can't make this stuff up. I said this card is known as short illness, right? And so here we are, again, dealing with house, self-isolation, being at home. Why? Because of the COVID-19 or the coronavirus, right? And this is about, recovering from that. Now, this could be talking about people who are actually afflicted with that. And again, going back to the mentor card, one of the populations that's being most affected and impacted, sad news, remember sad news is facing this card, this is the effect, are being affected and impacted are the older population, right? So for someone, this may come close to home because there may be a male family member who's going to be affected by the corona. I would love to be wrong about that, right? But that is a possibility because that's what I'm seeing in the line, right? So it could be for somebody, this whole experience is going to hit close to home, right? And I'm also seeing that we are in a process of recovery. This is becoming quite clear. It's like, what is the strategy? Chess piece. Chess is a game of strategy. What is the strategy from getting us to move from this place, being isolated and being kept in our homes, to being in a process of recovery where we can recover from this and we can move beyond being in our homes, right? But again, the setbacks card, and I love the name in this particular case because right now this is actually a setback, right? For a lot of us, we're experiencing a setback. But the image to me conveys this idea about being in a process of recovery. So that could be You know, again, maybe people are recovering from other types of issues that are close to home, right? And knowing that you can heal it, that you can recover from it. But I'm going with the larger collective, that this is actually talking about the healing and recovery from coronavirus, COVID-19, but also recovering from this period of self-isolation and self-quarantine and stay-at-home orders, whether they are voluntary in nature or mandated, right? So I think it's just trying to send us a message somewhat that we will heal and we will recover from this as a collective. We will, right? It's a setback that we will all recover from, right? But again, the thief card is asking us to consider what are the takeaways. If we are in a process of recovery, what's the missing piece? This card is making me feel like there's a piece that is missing that we haven't discovered yet, right? And right now, the way we are maybe looking at the experience is that it's robbing us and it's cheating us, right? It's taking things away from us. And maybe that's a takeaway. It could be, again, I'm being extremely metaphorical here and metaphysical when I say this, but maybe the experience is getting us to appreciate all the things that we do outside of our living spaces. Yeah? And so maybe this week is asking us all to be maybe a little more self-reflective, house, and asking us what's the takeaway from this for us as an individual, and maybe what's a takeaway for us as a collective, right? You know, there may be something going on a personal level regarding healing and recovery, and then we're also experiencing that as a collective. So on that note, I will go ahead and end this week's Oracle Outlook reading here. I'm James Himm Mitchell, and as I close, I'd like to thank you so much for spending this time with me, and I look forward to sharing the same space with you again in our next Oracle Outlook video reading together. So until then, I'm hoping that you have the best day possible, and I'm hoping that you have the best week possible. Take care.